G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, we are talking all about how to recession-proof your portfolio. Joining me in the studio, big Mr. Teeuwsen, mate. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me back again. But yeah, it's been a big week, hasn't it?
It has, mate. It has.
Had a lot on. So,
mate, it's been a big month.
Yeah.
It's been a big month. So there's been a lot going on, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. They all roll into each other when we're busy, but we wouldn't have it any other way, would we?
We wouldn't, mate. We certainly wouldn't. And, mate, on reflection, it's actually been a huge financial year. Man, very exciting. But today, big fella, we're talking all about how to recession-proof your portfolio.
I think it's something that a lot of people ask about. It's probably not something we talk about a fair bit on the potty, but we do get a lot of people that ask us about, how to future-proof their portfolio and make sure they're not, taking on too much risk. Risk is healthy if used correctly, but
yes.
You also got to be smart about it and protect what you built. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through.
For sure, man, for sure. Now, mate, to define recession-proof as well, to me, bro, it's to be able to hold your portfolio as an absolute minimum as the economy, or if the economy potentially falters or slows down, to be eliminating risk as much as possible, but not to be completely stepping away from it as well. In reality, man, it's no different to really how you should be building your portfolio anyway. But I think it's good to be mindful of certain steps. I know that's what we're going to be talking about, but effectively recession-proofing your portfolio to still be able to hold and build your portfolio through a recession if we dive into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talk about buffers and making sure we have those sort of processes and protections in place a fair bit. Everyone has a different buffer depending on where they're in their portfolio. And I usually talk about an adequate buffer for the size of the portfolio. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a set amount per property or a set amount per portfolio. It's different to everyone. People with kids like to have a little bit more of a buffer.
For sure.
Some of the younger men that we have usually go a little bit too skinny
and fly towards the sun.
But everyone's risk appetite's a little bit different. So we can definitely unpack a few different things we see a fair bit of.
100%, man. I think when it comes to buffers, bro, we'll leave that for a bit further in, because to me, obviously, it is a massive part of recession-proofing your portfolio. But to start with, man, I kind of want to dive into cash flow. Now, I think the way I look at it, man, is cash flow is king. And really, obviously, we play the game for both growth and for cash flow. But if we look at the portfolio and enabling ourselves to be able to hold a portfolio during, say, a recession or during an economic slowdown, the other big thing to throw into the equation, guys, is as long as you're buying in the correct locations, which we will dive into shortly as well, a lot of that will still maintain the heavy lifting. But when it comes to recession, and in particular, if your job is potentially ever at risk, understanding cash flows, which does fall in line with your buffer piece before as well, but understanding cash flows and that cash flows are so important to your journey and to your portfolio as well, it really is key to be able to make sure, for one, you can still hold your portfolio, but for two, you're still going to have the ability servicing-wise to keep moving forward as well.
I agree. And the cash flow piece is so critical. I still get a fair few people when we speak in strategies and I go, how negative are you in the portfolio? Do you have your number? And the amount of people that don't have the number is actually, it's higher than you'd think.
Yeah.
But then you obviously have, the largest majority of our clients are well educated and they've got, different trackers that you got in School of Property and different other things that we put in place. So, you ask them a question, they go, bang, here's my number.
Yes.
And it's, something they know very well. But then as people begin, or even people that, a bit time poor, they don't have that number. Knowing the number is important in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I think it's a really, really good point to make around that. And look, pretty much all APS clients these days are on the APS membership and they've got access to School of Property. And I strongly urge anyone that obviously is an APS client, make sure you're using that calculator, input all your numbers into it. It's literally how I track my own portfolio as well. So make sure you're putting your numbers in and you're up to date on everything, both from a cost-based perspective, but obviously as your rents change and different things change, just make sure you're staying on top of it from that perspective. Because I think exactly as Lukey's sort of alluding to there, that portfolio awareness and specifically around the cash flow awareness of your portfolio, either moving up, moving down, and obviously it can move down with interest rate decreases and all the rest of it as well. Potential releases at a slightly lower amount, as well as going up in different, at different times too. But it's really good to have that awareness across the board, because you may have one area that's maybe had ridiculous, maybe even rental growth, but then it may peter off from a peak, and a vacancy might drop from 0.5% to 1%, and it may just come back a little bit. If it's gone from potentially when you bought it was at $400 a week and then it goes to $550, but then plateaus out at $500 a week. You've always just got to be making sure you're tracking your numbers properly, because you have that happen on a couple of properties. You can be pretty close to a $10,000 difference both ways. It also can give you a bit more clarity that you've got the ability to move forward if you stay on top of it as well. So I think managing that is a really, really key point, and just staying on top of it from that perspective. And look, even from my size portfolio, I manage my own portfolio up to about 50 properties. Then I brought in an EA that was pretty much specific to managing the portfolio as well. And one of her key jobs is obviously throwing everything into the tracker as things come through, both lease end dates, what's it renting for at the moment, all the net costs, everything being adjusted and changed, tweaked as we go, to make sure that I can accurately track sort of where the portfolio is sitting, what can I carry, everything to do with it as well, even net equity position on each deal too. It just allows you to a lot more easily track your portfolio the way it should be done.
I agree. And you can definitely tell the people that do that, it shines through pretty clearly. I had a guy, it was probably a month or two ago now, and he literally said to me, he goes, I've calculated my portfolio is 42K negative and I've got 85K in the bank. I've got a 2-year holding cost. Nothing can touch my portfolio for 2 years with that in place.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, that's being all over it.
Yeah, for sure.
Calculating how long you can hold the portfolio without anything, affecting it whatsoever is pretty good.
And allows you to make an accurate decision on it as well. Because you may go, well, look, I'm willing to, put 20K of my own, salary in per month per year, to hold the portfolio as well. And then that actually would extend it out to 4 years, which is excessive, right? So maybe he comes back to maybe I'll come back to a 12, and everyone's got a different appetite risk. And so he may be going, we may track back and go, well, what are you seriously comfortable with? And they say 12 months. It's like, okay, sweet. Well, if you're willing to divert, 20K a year of your pay into that to hold the portfolio, plus 20 grand's worth of the buffer, sweet. We've got 60K over. Is there anything else we can strip to then potentially go and turn that into a deposit to buy another deal as well? So I think it's really important for everyone to understand the position they're in, risk appetite, what they're still wanting to do with the portfolio, and then keep growing it accordingly if that fits in with the risk profile and what they're trying to do as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, on that as well, kind of diving, I guess, a little bit deeper into the cash flow is king side of things and kind of talking about the assets in the market right now that can facilitate that. Now, obviously, again, for a lot of APS clients and even for long-term or long-time Scouting Australia podcast listeners as well, they would know that, obviously, probably rewind 12 months plus, we were obviously super heavy into residential cash flow deals. A lot of clients, would have benefited from some serious rental growth, and some deals they might have done at 7.5%, 8% plus yields would probably now be 12, 13, 15% yields now as well. But obviously the time in the sun for residential property from a cash flow perspective is done right now. So obviously that pivot into commercial, which we've obviously done as a business, and the both of us obviously done from an actual acquisition perspective in our own portfolios as well. How have you seen that sort of playing out, even in the dialogue, the chats with clients, and obviously knowing what we're sourcing for clients as well from that cash flow commercial perspective?
Yeah, I definitely think people have been very open to it because, we've always talked about how everything has its time in the sun, whether it be markets or different asset classes. I think from an ethical point of view, I think a lot of clients and a lot of people that we've worked with for a long time respect the fact that we didn't just keep pushing in markets and deals that weren't the right thing for them. So a lot of the conversations I have is, one, the reason why it came about, it wasn't ethically right for us to keep pushing it. The markets that we're in had so much growth and the yields softened a little bit if you were to purchase them now. The people that had them, they're incredible, as you mentioned, but it wasn't right to keep buying for them if they weren't going to do the job or like we talk about with clients all the time, purpose-based investing. So key. You need to know what the asset's doing, what the purpose is, and then down the track, you can actually make decisions as to what it does or how it fits in the portfolio. Does it need to be sold off? It's not growing it, and its purpose is growth.
Yes.
We need to get rid of that thing.
Yeah.
So if we were going to put those deals in the portfolio for a purpose that we said was cash flow and they're not going to do that, it's not the right thing. So we're having those conversations, but in terms of commercial and answering you.
I'll just jump in for 1 sec before you go into that as well. Man, I think one of the other interesting things that I've witnessed too is man, there's a lot of clients that bought cash flow deals and sat on them because they're like, I want to keep building it. I don't want to take time out from a build perspective. I want to keep building the portfolio instead. And they might have sat out for 12 months and then that 12 months might have turned into 24 months. And it's been really interesting sort of reassessing clients' portfolios. And I've actually just done this recently for myself as well, where I've assessed deals that I had earmarked for grannies, these granny builds on them, which even if I built them now would still be great returns. But the granny build price in some of these areas has increased by $50,000, $100,000 in some of these areas. And it would take 12 months to build it, sometimes longer. WA is even longer than that at this point to build it. And the build price has gone up by circa 100,000. So I'm looking at them now going, well, the asset's actually doubled in value. I could go and park it in a commercial asset that's actually going to give me a significantly higher return. And whether I sell down two of them and go park it into one, or go sell down one, bank $300,000-400,000, go park it in one, something like that. And we're seeing a lot of clients, which is awesome, being able to help them with that transition, that transitionary pivot into a better cash flow asset rather than building on it now. And I literally was having a conversation with a client about it this morning, referred him over to a real estate agent yesterday to sell one of his properties in Perth. And he said, oh man, are you sure we shouldn't build on it? And I said, and we worked out what he was going to bank net. This is big Johnny Kasapi. Give him a shout out because he just bought himself a Lambo as well, mate. So well done on that front. But he was having a good look at it. And we were having a good look at it and assessing it. And I go, man, with what I can get you right now in commercial versus building that property is going to take you out of the market for the next 18 months probably. It's a Perth build. He hasn't even started plans yet. You would have to do that. It would take him out of the market actually to buy because of the construction loan with no income. And with what we can transition and pivot into now instead, it just makes so much more sense to sell it, bank that profit, clear the debt, and we go buy that great asset in commercial instead. And I think having had the chat with him and then explaining how I had done it myself on a few deals as well, he obviously trusted the process around it, because this is one of the things, I think the great things about APS is they all know I lead from the front. If I'm doing something, I'll tell our clients what I'm doing personally and what we're helping other clients with. It sort of just like solidifies the fact and the I guess the thought pattern behind it, that it makes sense to do it. And you show them the numbers and like, wow, that makes sense. Especially you look at the cash flow numbers now compared to building it now, your build costs increase, time out of the market, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it a no-brainer, especially when you can buy an asset that almost straight off the bat, either it's existingly tenanted at a great net yield, or we buy it vacant, do a refit. It can still be an accelerated strategy, but maybe it's a immediate 3-6 month turnaround, depending on if we do a little project in there and then release it. The significantly better returns we can now achieve out of commercial cash flow versus resi, which I'm loving being heavily involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually seen a fair few people do. We strategize that quite regularly, where people haven't built on those sites, and we essentially a cash flow deal or a granny flat site is essentially a bread and butter until you action it.
For sure. Still great growth locations, still very similar, if not the same discount.
Yeah,
just had the ability to granny.
That's it. And we had one, even my brother's doing this. My brother has a cash flow site over in WA, and he's selling it off as a bread and butter because it's just done, well from a growth point of view, and bank the profit and can move it into a larger cash flow deal or other assets as well. So I've definitely seen the landscape change in regards to cash flow. And a lot of people say, are we ever going to go back into resi? And this is something we get a fair bit of. You've always been, and we've always been as a business, very open to any opportunity. I would never close the door on it completely, because we never know in 2 or 3 years' time or a year's time, the market or an opportunity might present and we go, yeah, that makes sense to do. But at the moment, the best opportunities and the best results and sort of capacity to scale is where we're in at the moment, which is some of these commercial deals. Some of the ones we're finding are pretty crazy when you look at them. If only there was more of them.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing, and this is why we have a cap per month on how many clients we sign on for commercial, for specifically that reason. It's obviously a more limited market, but the quality of the deals, the quality of the net yields and everything as well. We uphold a very high standard. Obviously, our name, which is pretty golden in the resi space. I never wanted to sully it. Going into commercial, unarmed, uneducated, making the wrong deals, and this is where we're taking our time with the correct deals. We've got the correct team in there, but yeah, we're just not going to flood the books on that side as well. So making sure the deals are absolute premium quality. One other thing to throw in, which I think is really important, and it's not only on a commercial side, it's on all sides, but I think things like obviously tenant quality and retention through it as well. Now, obviously, when it comes to commercial, very, very important that you're going to be able to find a good tenant, maintain a longer term lease. That's where the real benefits of those net yields come into it. If you're turning a property over every 12 months in commercial, it's going to be a very expensive exercise. You're going to have extended periods of vacancy. Leasing fees are more expensive, everything associated with that. You can find a quality asset either with a quality tenant that's been in there for a while, or be able to buy something, do a refit, and then get a great tenant over a long period of time as well. It makes, when you look at the genuine cash flow numbers, very, very important. But if we're talking about recession-proofing your portfolio, you need to be all over tenant quality, retention, everything from that perspective, both sides of the coin, both resi and commercial. You need to be all over it from that tenancy quality perspective.
I agree. And even like in the residential space, keeping tenants happy goes a long way.
For sure.
If you're going to be, one of those landlords that, won't do anything and it affects their quality of life.
Jimmy not calling anyone out.
No. We won't call him.
Sorry. Alias.
Yeah.
Zen Master.
You look after your tenant, they look after you. If you have to do some minor maintenance to it to keep it in a good standard, if it's something that is like a luxury and it doesn't really need it or changes the quality of the property, then no. But like if you're talking about the kitchen sink being broken and them not be able to wash the dishes properly,
Why haven't you put a dishwasher in there, Lukey? Stop being a shit landlord.
Oh, you turned it a little bit. But making sure that they can live properly and you're reducing the amount of downtime, because if you've got a good tenant that stays long term, you've got less reletting fees, less downtime.
Your net cash flows are significantly better
over time. And if you get that mentality, you look after your tenant, we can add to that recession.
Mate, I think that leads perfectly into actively managing your portfolio. And I think this is something that's super, super important that so many people actually take their finger off the pulse. The same as updating your cash flow sheets, this tenancy retention, all this sort of stuff that we're talking about. People not actively managing their portfolios is actually one of the most costly things they can do. And that both comes down from a tenancy perspective and a property management perspective like we're talking about. And it also can come down to obviously, things like knowing when you've got equity that can be released, actively managing that side of the portfolio, keep building it from there. But if we're talking specifically around recession-proofing your portfolio, things like making sure your rents are at market, especially if you're someone that is hypersensitive to how much rent you're getting in. Remember, you build a 4 or 5 property portfolio, even at a 4 or 5 property portfolio, if you're 20 to 25 bucks a week short, that is literally, it's going to be, it could be a $5,000-$10,000 difference over the course of a year, over the course of those properties as well. So you want to make sure you're all over your rental perspective, keeping them at market. The worst thing you can do is let it start dragging a long way from market, because then it's going to be very hard to bring it back in line. You're going to have tenant kick-ups. You're just going to have issues from that perspective. So if you're not hypersensitive to the market changes, like myself, I like to keep, even though I could have all my properties up maybe $20, $30 a week, and obviously it would be a pretty significant amount of the size portfolio that I've got. But in reality, I know that from a tenancy retention perspective, by keeping them that little bit below market value, like just slightly below, you might literally be talking 20 to 30 bucks a week. The tenants stay happy. They know they're on a good wicket. You upkeep your maintenance like you're talking about there, obviously within reason, not being if you've got a silly tenant asking for all the silly stuff, not just approving everything. But again, this comes into actively managing your portfolio and understanding what is worth being fixed and who's trying to have it on. And that also comes down to then having a really good relationship with your property manager. And I think that's really, really important. And again, like people get a bit weird about, but if I got, properties in, let's say I got 5 properties across 3 different locations, I got 3 different property managers. It's like, yeah, sweet. But like, you've got to see them as like an arm in your business that you do have to also actively manage to make sure that your portfolio is being looked after properly.
No, I couldn't agree more. And, when we talk about this topic, there's so many, we were talking about it the other day, there's lots of different things that combine to the overall outcome. You can't just do one of these things and expect it to be perfect. Yep. You need to sort of take note of a number of different things and put it all into place for it to combine to the overall outcome that we're trying to achieve.
For sure. No, man, I love that. And I think one of the other things that come into actively managing your portfolio too, and effectively recession-proofing it. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, around people sort of hanging on to properties for longer than they should. And I think it's being very active with properties they have in their portfolio, treating it like a business. Actively managing your portfolio comes down to treating your portfolio like a business. So specifically when you have growth properties in there, well, like we've spoken about here, deals that were in the portfolio for cash flow that haven't been executed, and you're looking at it and going, but I always wanted to build a granny on that. But now at market rents, maybe it's a 5% yield or a 6% yield. Well, could you sell that bank $300,000-$400,000, go park it in a commercial with a 6 to 7% net yield and have done it with cash? Like the return on that would be so different. And to break that down, when I said obviously 5 to 6% yield with resi, we're talking gross. So you might net 3 to 4%. Whereas you could potentially roll it into a commercial deal with a 6% plus net return. And by that, I mean your net holding costs are included in the lease numbers, meaning your net cash flows could potentially be double, either something at the same money or carry that cash deposit into a more expensive asset, be able to get yourself a slightly lower LVR on it, and then still have that significantly higher net rent. I remember when I first worked out the numbers on this thing properly, it was blowing my mind. Obviously, deals that I had done and executed in the day was sweet, but it was those deals that I'd held for longer, and I was doing the cross analysis, and I'm like, this just doesn't make sense to actually go and build it myself or build it myself now, 2-3 years down the track at the pricing it is now, compared to if I went and rolled this into a different asset and the return I would get, the significantly better return I would get by taking that action.
No, absolutely. And even, for example, some of the granny flat sites where people have the house and they intended to renovate it too.
Yes.
So, build on the back plus renovate the front property so they had, something in good condition that they can hold on to long term. So factoring in those renovations to bring the front property up to standard too. That's where some of those decisions have come. But one of the points you mentioned there is obviously actively managing your portfolio, but that also comes down to reviewing it regularly too. And that's why I wanted to touch on that point there. If an asset is underperforming and is not achieving its purpose within the portfolio, it has to be reviewed and you have to weigh up its position in the portfolio. Does it stay or does it go? And where this comes, it's not critical now. You might be fine with the portfolio, holding it comfortably. You got good buffers in place. Let's say we hit a recession or you lose your job or incomes change and that asset was 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 grand negative, but you could hold it then, but you can't hold it now. Let's say the market's down, we're in a recession, there's no one buying. You can't now offload that property.
Other than at a loss.
Exactly. And it's now putting the entire portfolio at risk over just potentially cutting that asset that didn't perform. Or maybe it performed really well. It had a really good 3, 4, 5 year run. It did its job, but you're holding on to it just in case it does another 10 or 20%. Are you going to risk the whole portfolio over that last 10, 15, 20%? Probably not. So regularly reviewing your portfolio, the assets within it and how they fit into the wider portfolio is really important. So that, for me, that comes down to risk mitigation as well. Protecting what you've built. You've done very well to build to whether it's 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, whatever the number is one asset worth risking the entire portfolio over and you having to get to a point where you're fire sailing things when the market's bad or because you need to, because, you've lost your job or something's happened.
Yeah, man. Dude, I think it all comes down to being proactive versus reactive, right? So proactively managing your portfolio. This is the thing, when we say actively, we don't mean reactively. It's not after shit happens. You're doing it beforehand and staying very much with that longer term view. You want a short, mid, long-term view in your portfolio. And in reality, every property should fit a specific purpose within it or a specific time frame within it. If something's a short term, okay, it's probably either being sold or it's being released or something's happening, renovation, builds, different things like that are potentially happening in the short term. Potentially sales as well. If you need to sell something, offload something now that's maybe had its run, it's done its dash, whatever. Medium term might be something that I'm acquiring now, and that I might be selling in that time frame. Or maybe I've held it for a year or two and it's just starting its run, and the medium term might be a 3 to 5 years, that we might be looking to hold it for too. And what leases do I potentially have coming up in that time frame? Let's say it's commercial and I've got a deal that lease is ending in 3 years. Okay, sweet. Do we know if they're renewing or not renewing? And that's a long time away to obviously be looking at it from that end. But you've got it in your mind, and it's part of the game plan of, do I need a plan for this thing to potentially be vacant for a 3-month window while we relet it if it's vacant? And having it in there in the distance, it could almost formulate part of a strategy of what you do in terms of what you're going to sell. Do you sell it in the lead up to that to make sure you've got nice cash buffers to hold out for a really good tenant at the right money, versus being desperate at that time frame, taking a shit tenant at lower money and maybe for a 12-month window instead, which could very seriously turn into a headache. And I think, man, that's that medium term planning, and then the long term planning could obviously formulate into the overall strategy as well. So I really like that side of things and planning from that perspective. But again, it comes down to being proactively with managing your portfolio versus reactive.
The amount of times though you see people react to things and something happens and it reacts that could have probably been mitigated if they were on top of things as well. So,
and things will always happen. It's not like it's smooth sailing forever. There's going to be times where unforeseen things pop up and happen. And it's just part of the game, man. Like sometimes this stuff happens. Literally today, we got the phone call. We vacated a property of ours a couple of weeks ago of my own, and was literally getting it ready for sale. Was just literally just about to take it to market. And yeah, man, like we found out just got broken in. There's about $10,000 worth of damage that we're gonna have to put through insurances as it was sitting there. And yeah, man, it's like one of these things. It was an unforeseen sort of thing that popped up, happened. Okay, it's a little blip in the radar. But something like that, something that you can't really plan for it. It's sometimes these things just sort of happen, and we literally try to turn it around as quickly as possible to get it ready for sale, vacate it, get it ready for sale, take it. And sometimes, man, you just get unlucky with these things. But majority of the stuff can be planned for well ahead of time with it as well. But it's just like, it's not like things aren't going to happen. But again, we found out that happened, bang, straight on top of it, fixed it, actively managed it, got it done. We didn't cry in our soup about it. We fixed it as quickly as we could. We put a plan in place, and then bang, man, we moved forward.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But that mentality has also been built over time. That for people that may have only had their second or third or even first property, something like that probably would have really rocked them and put them in a place where, is this the right thing for me? So obviously,
and that's why I like to share it, man, because in reality, like it happens to all of us, whether you got one property or 100 properties, this stuff can happen and happen across the board as well. So I think it's just, I think just relevant to sort of pass on the fact that this stuff is normal. This stuff does happen, and just realize it's part of running a business, which is your portfolio. And again, plan for it. It is what it is. Get things fixed, move it forward, keep going. Don't get deviated from the plan. Don't get stuck in the depths, in the muck. Just keep it moving forward and build, because we're all going to go through stuff like this at every stage of the portfolio. Different things will come and hit you. You just got to keep moving through it. Absolutely.
Probably one of the big ones I had, and we mentioned it at the start, was obviously maintaining adequate buffers in place. Now, a buffer is relevant to the individual. And the size of the portfolio.
Yes.
Every person and every portfolio probably needs a different buffer depending on their risk appetite, 2, their income, and 3, their size of the portfolio. So you got a few different variables there. But that example I gave at the start where, I'm 40K negative, I've got 80K, I'm sweet for 2 years. And that's purely just on cash. Obviously, if you tip in an income lower. So maintaining that buffer is so important. If you lost your job tomorrow, is the portfolio at risk of being fire saled and losing what you've built? So making sure, one, you know your number. What's your cash flow number? Is it positive? Is it negative? How much is it negative? How much is it positive? Knowing how much of your income per year you're putting into the portfolio to maintain it, how much is coming from cash, how much is coming from income. What ratio, because everyone's ratio would be different depending on their income as well. But knowing all these numbers in advance and not waiting for something like you to lose your job or the economy to go into a recession, something bad happening to go, oh my God, I'm not covered. I was putting in too much of my income and now I'm short, etc. So knowing your numbers, knowing how much buffer you need, and making sure it stays in place.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I think buffers are one of those really important things that the individual has to plan it out. And again, if you're working with APS, have a chat to your strategist, work through that with them, with what you're comfortable with, your income, your current position, all the rest of the sort of stuff, relevant to your risk appetite for wanting to grow the portfolio as well. And you kind of said it right at the very start of, a young fella. I remember myself, man, there was a few times where first, second property, even through to kind of the first 6 properties, man, there was times I got down to like having a couple of grand in my bank account and had to go sell myself on the street. But
how much you charge?
More than you can afford.
Here we go.
Not back then. I was taking a bloody KFC, bloody Zinger box at that point. But in all seriousness, I flew very close to the sun, but it was very relevant to, I was a very low income earner, and I knew property was my vehicle, and I was just going hell for leather, just trying to make this thing happen. But obviously someone with a family and 2 kids, a wife and 2 kids, or a husband and 2 kids, whatever, they can't fly that close to the sun. You have to be very accommodating to your situation. And if this is your avenue and you're young and you're single, whatever, you might fly close to the sun and just, throw a bit more into it and push a bit harder and all the rest of it. But again, if you're in the position where maybe you got a family and all the rest of the stuff that you got to support and got to really take into account, you want to be careful with your buffers, because you can't I mean, you could if you really needed to, but like you don't want to be in that position where you got to go work 3 jobs and have no social life, which is literally what I did through my late teens and early 20s, just to keep pushing and scaling and getting some extra cash and working it like that as well. And man, and that was a sacrifice that I was willing to make at the time because these are the results that I wanted to get. But again, it's got to be relevant to the individual as to how hard you want to push, and also like if you're on decent incomes, again, let's say we're talking family, you got dual income household earners, maybe making 200-300 grand combined income. You don't need to fly as close to the sun. You don't need to go as crazy because you're also making a lot more than I was making at 39 grand a year, So again, it's all relevant. Work it out with your strategist, figure it out, plan it out properly, and then stick to that so you can make the right decisions and not get caught out.
Yeah. And probably the thing I would say on that is, absolutely speak to your strategist, but know your number. We need to, both take accountability for people's portfolios. But, if you're coming to us and we say, well, what's your cash flow looking like? And you say, not sure, I don't have a tracker, I've never looked at it. There has to be some accountability there for people to have a look into how their cash flow is looking and tracking that on a day-to-day or month-to-month, a year-to-year, so we can actually assist.
I literally won't even do a strategy session if someone hasn't sent through an updated cash flow sheet. I literally won't do it because I'm like, I'm going to jump on there and you're not going to have the numbers that I need to actually take value out of this session. So I'll just cancel it and just move them to a week later or 2 weeks. Well, at the moment, it's once a month, 1 week a month that I do them. So if someone doesn't have those numbers with me, actually, these days, the EA literally will just cancel it beforehand because if they don't have it, they don't have those updated numbers. I can't give you an accurate run of how we should be doing things. So, because I need to look, I will look at the portfolio obviously super closely, diligently, or to work all this sort of stuff out and strategize off the back of it as well. So the client they need to be all over that from that perspective so that people can help them with their job. And even from their own perspective, they need to be comfortable with the numbers and very aware of their numbers. It can't just be a one-sided transaction. I don't care how much someone makes. In reality, you have to understand that piece of the equation in your own journey because ultimately it's a business and you need to treat it like a business. And treating it like a business is what's going to make you the most money out of this game. So when you understand it properly, you treat it like a business because you could realize that you've got capacity for an extra deal a month. An extra deal a year. Maybe an extra deal a month. Who knows how much you're making. But at least an extra deal a year. Like how much could that compound in over a 5-10 year window? It's talking another 5-10 deals plus. So let's be all over it from that perspective so you can make the right decisions, push as hard as you're comfortable to.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the main thing you say. The accountability has got to be there. More than happy to help people and we'll go to the nth degree to help people and help scale and get the results and do the research, find the markets.
Sure.
But, know your numbers, know your cash flow, don't put yourself in a position where, you get to a point and you have to point fingers and say, well, they did it to me. I didn't know what was happening. You need to know your numbers and your cash flow.
No, I couldn't agree more, man. Dude, just to touch back on what you were saying before around selling as well, I kind of had as one of my final points I wanted to run through. Mate, everything to do with selling down properties, man. I think it reverts back to being super active in your portfolio. Whether it's like we discussed, a cash flow site that we've decided to sell or something that we think's ended in its market. So often I see this happen and people don't want to sell down an asset. But what happened was what you spoke about earlier. If they bought something and seen significant growth, they've stripped all the capital out of it or they've stripped it hard. But then we think that market's done. But I'm going to hang on to it because I like this property or it did really well or the rest of it. And it's like, but it's going to cost you 30-40 grand a year. If it doesn't start running again for 10 years, it needs to make 300 to 400 grand in capital growth before you break even if it's going to cost you 30 to 40 grand a year to hold. Yeah. So assessing properties like that and ensuring that, it just when you run those numbers, like literally work those numbers out. And even if it's 10 grand a year or 15 grand a year negative, you still got to be up 100 to 150 grand before you even break even and start making profit again. So is it the correct decision to sell it and move on? In my personal opinion, all growth assets when a market has finished its run, yes. That being said, you have to be very understanding of when a market has done its run. And that's where you want to lean on people that you work with or professionals or mentors or whatever it is to get a really good feel on has a market actually done its run? Because we've seen in areas before and markets before, markets plateau out and then start again. I saw it happen in Sydney. We saw it happen in Brisbane with the land tax, state land tax thing that came in. The market stalled for 12 months and then kicked and like the market's done another 300 grand. for average price property since then again. So it's really understanding it. And then again, should you sell it? Do you need to sell it? Should you sell it? Should I hold for the next little wave that potentially could be coming in? It's something really, I think, prudent and relevant to discuss now because the interest rate cuts that are obviously starting to flow in and the new, federal government incentives around, the new limits on buyer thresholds for the grants, the partnerships they're doing, the 15-20% on the purchasing now is 5 and 15% to make up the 20% of a loan, of a deposit, those first home buyer schemes, man, all that sort of stuff will have a positive impact on the market. It's if this market you still hold property in, is it going to perform? Is it something that potentially could kick on? And do you need to sell to keep moving forward, or could you still potentially hold that asset for some continued gains? I know we were actually talking off air about this morning at Brekkie about this specific thing as well, man. So it's, again, everything's got to be actively managed and actively assessed in the portfolio.
I think opportunity cost is something that, weighs very heavily on that topic because so many people are like, I don't need to sell it. That's the first thing I hear. Yeah. I don't need to sell it, so I won't. Well, what is the opportunity cost of holding that asset? Could you sell it, clear the debt, and get into 2 deals? 2 deals in new markets, even 1 deal in new market is going to outperform the rest of the cycle on that market that you're in. So it's one of those things you've got to look at what the cost of holding that is, whether it be, is it risking the rest of the portfolio if you were to lose your job or in the recession, or is it risking another deal or another 2 deals or another 3 deals in new markets?
I think it comes down to assessing whether you do need to sell it or not to still achieve that outcome. Because if you are still able to achieve that outcome and hold that asset, then I think it's worth the conversation around the hold. Because there are obviously entry and exit costs of getting in and out of new deals as well. And if we think something's got enough left in the tank, then it's a conversation worth having. But again, it's assessing it properly, and will it literally hold you back from multiple additional deals, or can you still hold it and still get into the multiple additional deals as well? So I like it, man. It's a good point. Opportunity cost is huge, and everything has to be assessed from an opportunity cost perspective as this
Yeah, 100%. And the hard part there is there's hundreds of different scenarios when it comes down to that.
Everyone's. We said from the very start, this whole thing is individual, is very personal to the individual.
Correct. And that's what I mean. And that assessment comes down to where you are in your portfolio, the market, when did you buy, how much it's worth, how much debt you're holding on it. There's just so many variables there. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. We can't we can't sort of help in every situation in this conversation, but obviously when we analyze it and look at it closer, we can.
Yeah, for sure. Man, the final thing I wanted to run through today, dude, was really around the correct mindset. And I think the correct mindset is huge. And I think really when it comes to something like a recession or something potentially happening, even whether it's with your job, whether it's the economy or whether it's with a specific market, whatever it is, I think really assessing that and making sure you're building that bulletproof mindset and continually sharpening the sword around that as well is absolutely crucial. So many people, man, they kind of get rocked, like we were talking before about the situation with me. They get rocked by 1 or 2 things that might have, or one singular event that might happen in their portfolio. But a property went up $100,000 and you have, let's say in a 12-month window, or 50, 100 grand in a 12-month window, but they're hyper fixating on one thing that's happened, whether it's a
broken tile.
I was going to say a broken tile on the roof or, someone breaking in and trashing it. But again, you look at it, it's like, okay, sweet. My excess is $1,000. Now I get a fresh paint job and fresh carpets taking it to market. Beautiful. Now I get a semi-renovated, I can sell it as a semi-renovated property and it cost me $1,000. Always look for the silver linings in these things. And sometimes they blow your head up and they can wean in and get inside you as well. But before you panic and before you start stressing out, just have a think, is there a silver lining on this thing? Is there something I can learn from this thing? Is there something that I'm actually going to gain out of this thing? All these sorts of things. Can I assess it? Is there actually a positive in this scenario or is it all a negative? And even if it's a negative, okay, sweet. What lesson can I take from this that I now can apply to the rest of my portfolio? And I think it's very normal, and people need to understand it's very normal early in the journey that when things pop up, it can knock you, or can feel like it's ready to knock you off the course. But what you've got to realize and understand is that these are just learnings and these are just lessons, and you've really just got to look at it as that. Take the learning. Sometimes you've got to take a little bit of a hit, keep moving forward. Obviously, don't repeat it again or avoid it as much as you can on the next property, on the next deal, on the next lease, whatever it is as well, to make sure you don't make that mistake. So, or that same thing, potentially, if it can be avoided, avoid it. So, yeah, man.
Yeah. And probably the thing I would say on that is it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yeah.
the market will go through a downturn. We, as an economy, we usually see something every 10 years. You know, you had the dot-com crash, you had the GFC, you had COVID. There'll be something in the next 5, 10 years. There'll be something 20 years after that. It's not a matter of if, it's when. It'll happen, and you've got to be prepared for it. If you get to a situation like that and you go, oh my God, where did this come from? No one knows. It's going to happen at some point. And exactly what you said, you know, things are going to happen with a tenant. They're going to happen with a property manager. Something is going to happen, whether it be losing a job, the recession, COVID. Who could have predicted that? So it's one of those things. It's going to happen.
Longevity in the game, like time in the game is absolutely key. Like that longevity piece in the game. I'm not talking about time in the market specifically per property. I'm talking about time in the game, longevity in the game, because that compounding effect of, you know, rolling different profits into different deals, everything to do with that side of things as well, man. It's all part of the game. The longer that you're in the game for, the longer that you're being active in your portfolio, the greater the compounding return that you're going to see in your journey, in your portfolio as well. And you just got to stay the course, man. That's the biggest thing. You know, even from a mindset perspective, the biggest thing is just staying the course, holding the course, sticking to the strategy, repeating the things that are working, take things on the chin as they come, take the lesson from it, and keep building the portfolio, man. Keep building towards what that end goal is. Because, man, the amount of things I copped very early in the journey, the rejections, the no's, everything that I heard the whole way through the journey, I could have stopped at property 2. You know what I mean? I could have stopped at 1 when I couldn't get the equity out of deal 1, and it took me a while to get that back out. You know, these little things will come up. You got to take it on the chin, learn the lesson. Like, what are the things I can take from this thing? And obviously, I didn't realize it back then because I didn't have this sort of resource all the way back then when I was doing it. But this is a cool thing that we can pass on, is that this is just the norm. This is the norm of what you're going to cop in the journey. You just got to face it, take it, realize it's all part of it, and keep moving forward, keep moving towards that goal.
Couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Lukey, mate. That's all I've got, brother. You got anything else?
Mate.
Done like a dinner. Done like a roast dinner on a Sunday at the pub for big Lukey Teeuwsen.
Oh, mate. What about that curry the other day? How good was that?
Curry was pretty good. Noodle Broadbeach. Give it a shout out. Get the double poached chicken with the curry sauce. Unbelievable. Throw a side of
couldn't believe it.
The beef brisket.
Yeah, beef brisket.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good. We definitely
enjoyed that as well.
Oh, did she?
She did, mate. She did. A little bit of beef brisket, a little bit of poached chicken. Yeah. Listeners, thank you once again for tuning in to another Scouting Australia podcast. I hope you took some great value from today's episode, and big Mr. Lukey Teeuwsen joining us in the studio as well. If you did take some great value from it, as always, please send on to someone else you think could also enjoy this episode and take some value from it. And if you're loving the Scouting Australia podcast, please make sure leave us that 5-star review on your favorite listening platform and hit the follow or subscribe button so that whenever the new eps come out, you get sent them every single time. And until next week, guys, that's another Scouting Australia podcast.